Well, hello from the world headquarters of the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. Bill Sherck here. It is windy and cold outside here in Minnesota, so I've got a hot coffee going today, and I'm going to sink back into my chair so we can talk a little bit about one of my favorite topics, fishing guides. In Minnesota Bound this week, we share the story of one of the best in the Midwest who went into the Hall of Fame. And the story of Jim McNall got me thinking, there are a ton of fishing guides who have made a life of introducing other people to fishing and sharing that passion and gathering a lifetime of really quirky stories, too. So I thought we could talk about that today on the Minnesota Bound podcast, brought to you by our good friends at Starbank. And along for the ride today is one of my favorite guides on the planet, a good friend of mine, Perry Good. Perry, are you there?
I am here. Thank you for having me.
I can't believe you're not on the water guiding today.
Well, I actually had a trip yesterday in Minnetonka. Went really well, but I'm kind of glad I'm not out today.
Pretty windy, pretty chilly. My, how the weather changes.
Yeah.
Barry, you are a long-time fishing guide and professional angler. You are in the Hall of Fame for your prowess on the water. Give us a little more about your background. How does a Lund and Rapala Pro come to be?
Well, I was fortunate. I grew up in a family where, I played three sports, but if I wasn't at practice or had a game, we were fishing. My dad loved to fish. We grew up in southern Minnesota, fishing the Minnesota River and a lot of the lakes in southern Minnesota. But my folks also had a place on Mille Lacs, so I would say that's probably where I refined most of my skills. And I guess I never dreamt of being a pro fisherman until about 1980, I joined a fishing club it's called the Minnesota Valley and Fisherman Club down in Apple Valley. And there were a lot of good fishermen there, and we had outings every month, and I did quite well. And then I started getting into tournaments on Mille Lacs, and and excelled fairly well there too. So it kind of just blossomed. And I was very, I guess, lucky that I met Gary Roach and Randy Ammerud back in like 1985, and they asked me to join their fishing team, and it was called Fishing Promos. And Fishing Promos had Gary Roach, Randy Ammerud, Tom Newstrom, Jim McDonald from Iowa, Bob Jensen, who's got a TV show, and it kind of just blossomed from there. And I really owe everything to Gary Roach and Randy Ammerud, really, for showing me the ropes and how to work with people and how to work with sponsors and what's important and what's not important. And, it really just went from there.
So those are a lot of the biggest names in the fishing industry up in the Midwest here. And you and I met, it's probably been 16, 17 years ago. You were a mentor of mine on Mille Lacs Lake. But one of the things I always noticed about you, yes, you're a professional walleye angler. Side note, one of the all-time winningest money leaders in professional walleye fishing. But one of the things I noticed about you that always stuck with me, you guys were always larger than life to us young anglers, right? But you were always involved in the local events, in the smaller events, in the charity events, probably events that you'd look at and say, what's he doing here? This isn't a big enough deal for a guy like that, but you've always been there. That's one of the things I noticed. Is that normal?
Well, I think a lot of your top guys, that's what it's all about, is, sharing your passion and giving back. And I would say most guys realize that. I was told by Al Linder years ago that the name of the game is sharing your passion and growing the sport. And, if all you can do is catch fish and you don't grow the sport and you don't help sell product, you're really no good to the industry. So
Hmm.
I took that at heart a long time ago, probably 30 years ago or so. And, I've been really involved with Fishing Has No Boundaries and Camp Confidence and Teen Challenge, Take a Kid Fishing, a lot of events like that, a lot of fundraisers. And, I honestly get more out of taking a kid fishing and doing Fishing Has No Boundaries than winning a tournament. And I mean, it lasts with you after you do something like that and work in the industry. And um, it's nice winning a tournament here and there, and and that's good for the pocketbook. But I don't know. I remember the times out with the kids at Camp Confidence more than anything, really.
So for folks who might not know what Camp Confidence is all about, it's up in Brainerd. It is a big facility. It is an amazing facility that gets people with disabilities outdoors, whether it be on a climbing course, in the woods, um, around animals, or on the water fishing. And you mentioned Fishing Has No Boundaries, which is a specific nonprofit that works through Camp Confidence and gets people on the water for these fishing events. And you are right, because we both just happened to do some of the Fishing Has No Boundaries events. To share your passion and give somebody the opportunity who doesn't necessarily get it normally, just to be on the water,
Yep.
to be in a boat, let the wind blow through their hair, watch a bobber go down, feel the tug of a walleye, um, and to just kind of stand back and watch that joy. Um, I suppose it's not something that we should be able to do. It's something we should have to do.
I totally agree. Something else I've really gotten into is, taking vets fishing on Mille Lacs, different places. Years ago, we had a tournament, a championship actually down in Kansas, and it was next to, I think, Fort Riley, if I remember. And during practice, some of us, we took guys that just got back from Afghanistan um, pre-fishing with us. And it was it was just a thrill, even if we didn't catch much, just sharing your passion with these guys, and just showing how much you appreciated what they did for the country and stuff. And that type of stuff really sticks with me as well.
You must also have some memories
Yeah, yeah.
of story of trips just gone wacky, right? Like where you have the best of intentions, but the trip just goes off the rails. You've been guiding for a long time.
Yeah.
Give me one of your top stories. I mean, there's got to be a day that just stands out.
Well, most of them are funny ones. One time I was guiding some guys up at Lake of the Woods, and actually it was some ex New England Patriots. Steve Nelson used to play middle linebacker for him back in the 80s, and he brought another Hall of Fame lineman with him, and my actually another guy that's Bruce Nelson. I shouldn't be giving these names because anyway, we were up on Lake of the Woods, and I was guiding these guys, and the ankle flies, the black flies, were just killing us. And
Ugh.
and I had some spray, but that works for about 2 minutes. And anyway, Nellie Bruce is in the back of the boat, and he's like, Perry, I cannot stand this. They're just driving me nuts. And um, I look over my shoulder. I'm up on the front trolling motor. I look over my shoulder, and here him and Steve had been applying my gulp spray, which I had back there. And I go, Nellie, what are you doing? And He goes, I'm putting more spray on. Here they had been spraying themselves with Gulp spray, crayfish flavor, and that stuff stinks. And the back of the boat was just covered with flies. And I never laughed so hard in my life. And I mean, I just cried. It was so funny.
Well, well, and then you've got to clean, that's like an oil-based
Yeah.
compound. So you have to clean the boat up. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
That's that's
So,
probably one of the more funny instances. I've had the opportunity to guide, some famous people. About 4 years ago, I got to guide the most interesting man in the world, the old Dos Equis guy,
yeah.
and I guided him and a buddy of his who was like his identical twin. I don't know if it was a stunt double or what, but got to fish with him for 4 or 5 days, and then a year later, I actually sold him my boat. And so, yeah, he called me up and he says, Perry, can you sell me your boat? And I said, well, I suppose. But, we had a lot of great times there.
Well, hold on. I know a little bit about this story. You got to give the inside scoop on what you did all day long.
As far as what?
He likes to smoke cigars, right?
Oh, yeah. As soon as we got
So,
in well, anyway, so we were up at Alexandria at a resort, and this vehicle pulls up, and Jonathan gets out. I didn't know who I was guiding, and he goes, "Are you Perry?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "I'm Jonathan Goldsmith."
and you
And
recognized him right away?
I recognized him, but I didn't know who he was.
Got it.
And they just had flown in from Vermont to the cities, and then they drove up to Alexandria. So they wanted to get something to eat before he went out fishing. So I helped him get his bags in and stuff, and we went down to around the pool area, and we order, and right away different people, women, were coming up asking him for his autograph, and I'm like, who is this guy? I didn't know who he was. And anyway, we had dinner, and we went out to the boat, and Jake from Rapid Marine comes up to me and he goes, "What are you doing with him?" And I said, "We're going fishing." And I pulled Jake aside and I go, "Who is he anyway?" And he goes, "You stupid idiot." He goes, "That's the most interesting man in the world." And I go, "The Dos Equis guy?" And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "Oh." So anyway, Jonathan likes to smoke cigars, and we get out to the lake, and right away he opens up his humidor, and he goes, "Choose your weapon." And I'm like, I don't need one. He goes, "No." He goes, "It's not polite to smoke alone." And so, needless to say, over the next 4 days, we had quite a few cigars.
you you became a human chimney, and you still can taste those things.
Mhm. And man, did we catch fish. We went the first day we went to Reno, and I mean, we caught nice walleyes and bass and crappies and everything. And then we went to Miltona a couple of days also, and I introduced these guys, him and his buddy, to jig and raplas. During a cold front, the fish, they had been on the weed line, but this cold front came in and they dropped down to 35 feet, and I could mark them easily. And we just wailed on them in 35 feet of water and jig and raplas, and they've never experienced anything like that. So, but I stayed in touch with Jonathan over the years and since then, and he's no longer the Dos Equis, guy, but I think he's retired now. And
Hey,
he's 80
got a
years.
fishing boat.
Yeah, he's got a boat, and um, yeah. So I mean, I've had a lot of great, you know, trips over the years, and some not so great. Broken quite a few of my St. Croix rods guiding, or gotten them broken. But you kind of just forget about that. And most of the trips, you meet a lot of great people.
You are listening to the Minnesota Bound podcast. Perry Good, fishing guide and Hall of Fame angler, is our guest today. Of course, the stories behind the stories. This podcast is brought to us by our good friends at Starbank, who we appreciate so much.
Hi there, Ron Shera here for Star Bank. If you're putting your money into mega banks down the street, who knows where that money's being used? It's time to make the switch. Bank locally. Keep your money local with a community bank that actually cares about you, your family, your business, and your goals. Let me give you some advice from personal experience. Check out the bank we use at Minnesota Bound. Try Minnesota's own Star Bank. You can find them online at starbank.net. When you call Starbank, you actually hear a real living person answering the phone. Starbank has 10 convenient locations around Minnesota to serve you and all the mobile banking products that you need to manage your money. From Maple Lake to Elbow Lake, Eagle Bend to Eden Prairie. Check out all that Starbank has to offer at starbank.net.
You know, Perry, guides are a quirky bunch. All kinds of personalities, all kinds of stories. I was bummed. For several years, we did a story called Legends of Rod and Reel, and we went out to highlight the stories of some of the most famous guides that everyone has heard of, probably a bunch that nobody has ever heard of, but probably should know about, and look back at the stories of how these people came to be. And one of the most interesting for me was a guy by the name of Billy Sandifer. Not real well known up in this part of the country, but down in Texas and down around South Padre, he is kind of an iconic, larger than life guide who fishes for sharks from shore along the Padre National Seashore, which is a kind of a long series of sand islands, like 40 miles long or something. And we went down to discover Billy's story. Deep, tanned, leathery skin, smoked sunglasses, an old kind of cowboy hat that had seen decades in the sun. Just a growly, raspy voice. And I fell in love with that guy. His story, he came home from Vietnam and he said, I wanted to get away from people. And the only place I knew to go was the end of the Padre seashore. So he literally went 25 miles down the beach to the dead end and kind of lived homeless there for a couple of years. And what did he do to bide his time? Same thing he did growing up in Corpus Christi. He fished. And suddenly people started bringing Billy groceries, donating food to him. And after a while, it got to the point where a person would sit with them and they could fish a little bit. And he'd paddle baits. He had an old truck tire inner tube, and he'd paddle out over the surf in that stupid inner tube out like 300 yards to drop the bait, rod still on shore, and they'd let it set and move with the current, and pretty soon a shark would pick it up. And he became a lifelong guide down there, driving a Suburban up and down the beach eventually, and doing the sea turtle rescue and the beach cleanup. But I talked to Billy, and he was starting to get old. Life had been, he was worn. And he looked at me and he said, someday I'm just going to go sit next to a tree. We're under kind of a palm tree sort of thing talking. And he was leaning against the tree. He said, I'm going to lean against that tree and I'm going to tip that head down. And you're going to wonder if I was ever even here. And you go, what? I mean, it was amazing, right? But those are the stories. Those are the people. And Billy was crusty. He's gone now, but his reputation is not. He was crusty. He was ornery, and he was just lovable and magical. And that's that to me is what a fishing guide is all about. People just wanted to be with Billy. And you're the same way here in the world of Minnesota fishing. People want to be around you. When I look at you at the sports shows working in the Lund Boats booth, people find you, right? Like, what do they want to talk to? They want your autograph? Do they want you to tell them where their favorite fishing? Like, what do people want? They just want to be around you.
Yeah, most of the time they just want to talk fishing, but hopefully at the boat shows they want to talk boats.
You just want to sell them a boat.
Well, right. So at times, when we, if we're having a conversation, whatever, and I see Jake peering over our shoulder, I'll tell him to get in the boat and pretend that I'm selling him the boat, and then we continue our conversation about the fishing trip that they're going to be going on up to Lake of the Woods or whatever, and
Jake is like your boss at the sports shows. He is the selling manager for
yeah.
Rapid Marine Group, and he is a classic sales guy. But he keeps tabs on you, right?
Oh, he does. Oh, he's a great guy. But I mean, there's a reason that Rapid sells more on boats than anybody else. And I mean, but anyway, because the key when you're at shows and stuff, you don't really want to sit and talk to your friends. In fact, when friends come along and stuff, I'll just tell them straight out that I can't really talk to them right now, and give me a call later. But if it's people that they're asking me about a lake, or I don't want to blow them off, and so I try to be as cordial as I can to people, and give them information. I'm giving people fishing information all the time, and I don't fish much for tournaments anymore, so I enjoy giving out information, on spots, and
yeah,
that's part of growing fishing.
Well, you've been a great influence on my life. First time we fished together, we joke about this all the time. We went bobber fishing on Mille Lacs. At one point in this world, nobody thought bobber fishing was cool for adults, much less pro anglers. And then you started talking about how effective it could be and how much money you had put in your family's pockets because of bobber fishing on the tournaments. And I thought, oh, this guy's probably worth listening to. And we've been friends ever since. And you've been a guiding mentor.
That was a great outing. That day we caught a lot of walleyes, a lot of smallmouth. But the bobber fishing, I don't know, with the slip bobber, I don't know if it started on Mille Lacs Lake, but it was really popular in Mille Lacs, and it still is. And even out in Devil's Lake, fishing the trees, a lot of people, out there bobber fish, and all it is a vertical presentation with a small jig that you can get out away from the boat. And basically that all it, and it's easy. So if you have kids in the boat, or people that aren't real good at casting or filling a jig bait, or it's a great way to catch fish, that's for sure.
Well, yes, and I think so many people equate bobbers with kids, right? A bobber, a hook, and a worm. And yes, that works, but when you apply that technique to different species in different areas, it is really effective.
Oh, it's, even on Mille Lacs Lake, driving around and marking individual big fish, down in 24 to 36 feet of water, and throwing a bobber on them. Nowadays with our spot lock that we have in our motors and stuff, you can just, on that deep water, you can just stop on those fish and fish individual fish. And I tell you what, it is really effective. A lot of people call it power corking.
Yep. I call it bobber fishing, and it works.
It really works good.
Is there something else as a guide that people are always asking you, or some secret piece of advice outside of don't use the fish spray to try and keep the bugs away? Is there something, that little piece of magic you give people?
I think what I try to do is, I want people to catch fish, and I want, it's great when they catch the biggest fish of their life with you and stuff like that, and take pictures. But I really like to show people that there's other ways to catch fish rather than using live bait. And nowadays the plastics are so good, um, and most of the time you do not have to use live bait. And once you get that confidence, in using, whether you're bass fishing or throwing swim baits for walleyes or even pulling crankbaits, once you can give them that confidence, they can go on and do it when they buy their own boat. But it's all about confidence, gaining confidence, and that's part of sharing your passion. Showing people, not necessarily how to fish. I mean, some days on a guide trip, you have to start from the beginning and show them that you don't hold a spinning reel, with on top of the rod. It's supposed to be below the rod, and
Sure.
It's always interesting. You ask somebody, do you reel with your right or your left hand? And about a quarter of the time, they're not sure until I give them the rod, and they're like, "Oh, okay, this feels more natural." Or
Yeah.
but you kind of take it for granted how much we know about fishing, and I mean, I guess we know a lot more than we think we do.
Well, just keep sharing it, right? That's all people can ask of you. If people want to track you down or try to see if you've got time to take them fishing, how do they find you?
Probably the best way is just my email, goodfish16@hotmail.com. Yeah, that's probably the best way. I'm on Facebook, and I work with a lot of different guide organizations. So, like on Minnetonka down here, we do a lot of business trips normally. This year with the COVID-19, those have kind of taken a hit. But I've taken a lot of the same people fishing for several years. They just book me for the same time slot just about every year. So I enjoy going up north, going to Mille Lacs, going to Leech Lake. I enjoy helping people learn their own lake. I mean, I'll people call me up and say, I live in such and such a lake, and we can never catch any walleyes here. Can you come up and show us how it's done? And I've done that a number of times, and yeah.
Wow.
So that's very enjoyable too. When you can, show them what they're missing, and and even showing people how to run their electronics. And so I've actually done this deal through Rapid Marine and for Lund Boats for quite a few years right now, where after guys buy a boat, I'll take them out in their own boat and set up their electronics for them, and go around the lake and mark places that look good for walleyes or bass or whatever, and try to do anything I can to make them enjoy fishing.
Fishing's nicest guide. I think that's a bumper sticker. I might slap that on your truck. I know where you live.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm sure I've learned that coming down. Years ago, I got to know Marv Kep really well, and he became a really good friend, him and his wife Judy. And I don't. So, like Marv up there and a few of the Nisswa guys up in Brainerd, they're red tails. They'll bait your hook like every time. And I would say I don't do that unless, say I have somebody in the boat that doesn't want to touch a leech or whatever. I will bait their hooks, but Marv, to this day, he baits everybody's hook all the time, and that kills me.
He was the first big time guide that I ever chased when I was a little kid, right?
Yeah.
On Gull Lake, when my family moved down in the 70s, they wanted a place in the woods. And at that time, Brainerd and Gull Lake, that was the spot. And so I'd be in a little 12-foot rowboat with a 3 horsepower Evinrude from like 1958. If you wanted to go in reverse, you just spun the motor around 180 degrees. That's how that stuff worked. But, I knew all those guys in Marv's posse. I knew what their boats looked like, so I could watch them from a distance. I certainly couldn't keep up with any of them. But I chased those buggers around Gull Lake for many years, watching from a distance. Special memories. Well, all right. Well, Perry, I sure do appreciate it. You and I need to make some new fishing memories. I suppose I can find you on Facebook and I'll hire you. And we'll go out and we'll fish together.
Yeah, you don't have to hire me, but I'd love to. I'd love to go frog fishing with you for bass, and nowadays I probably bass fish more than I walleye fish, believe it or not.
Yeah,
and I enjoy it. I mean, I still love eating walleyes, and they're fun to fish for, but it's hard to beat smallmouth fishing. That's for sure.
Well, I shouldn't tell you this, but yesterday when the rain was getting ready to come, the boys and I went to our little neighborhood pond. It's the same pond where we have the skating rink during the winter. And the boys started throwing topwaters, and it was largemouth after largemouth after largemouth. And I would argue for a Minnesota pond in a neighborhood, they were probably bigger than you might expect. So it was a pretty special day. So yes, I'm starting to get the itch for topwater fishing. And
where's this pond?
I'll ping you some coordinates. It's the one covered in duckweed. Perry Good, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories, brought to you by our good friends at Star Bank. Again, a great episode of Minnesota Bound this week, paying homage to Jim McDonald, one of the great fishing guides in the Midwest. Perry, you're another. We'll see you on the water real soon.
All right. Looking forward to it. See ya.
Until next week, don't forget to introduce a kid to the great outdoors. So long.